So good to see all of you, especially those who I haven't seen for a while. And now I'm going to share my screen with you. And okay, so a little background before we get to the topic of Rizpah, because in Deuteronomy, and I'm sure you even know this even from, from just, I wouldn't say common sense, but, it's maybe not in America, but certainly in Israel, we don't let bodies stay, out there for too long. I mean, sometimes somebody dies, at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'll bury him at 12 o'clock. This could happen in Israel. In America, it doesn't really happen that way. But, you're supposed to really basically not leave bodies. It's disrespectful, unburied. And in Deuteronomy 21, it says specifically, if any party is guilty of a capital offense and is put to death, and you impale the body on a stake, you must not let the corpse remain on the stake overnight, but must bury it the same day. For an impaled body is an affront to God. You shall not defile the land that your God Adonai is giving you to possess. Okay, it's said very, very clearly. All right. So the question is, we know of cases in the Bible where that's not the case. For instance, what do we see here in front of us here? To the left.
Is that from Esther?
Yeah.
Right.
Vayitlu et Haman, that's what it says. And not only Haman, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and his 10 sons. Okay? And they're hanging there. They're left out there. So, okay. So when there's a Midrash on Esther and the hanging of Haman and the sons and not cutting them down, right? And in Linda Levine's book, right, this is a quotation from her book, it says here, Zeresh, the wife of Haman, just when we thought that things couldn't get worse, the queen revealed that she was a Jewess, and therefore one of the people who Haman intended to put to death. The king was so incensed that he ordered Haman's execution and appointed that odious Jew, Mordecai, his executioner. Not only was Haman executed, but all our sons. Every day I went to where my sons' corpses hung from the gallows. The stench became so great that I petitioned the queen to allow me to take them down and bury them. What was her reply? Hanging was too good for my husband and our sons. As far as she was concerned, their corpses could rot there forever. So this really goes, clearly she did not know the halakha, Queen Esther, according to this. Right?
Well, the question is if the halakha applies to non-Jews.
Let's go back to see what it says here. If any party, doesn't say if a Jew, if any party,
okay.
the key be'ish. I think ish would pretty much mean everybody.
Okay.
Right? Look, I'm sure there are some people who will say that our enemies are not people, right? Today we certainly have that going on, all right? So, so in the second Targum, the Targum Sheni to Esther, it says here, when the royal scribes, this is translated from the Aramaic, I'll make it a little bit bigger. All of this, by the way, is coming from Linda Levine's book. It's a wonderful source. When the royal scribes of Haman saw him and his sons hanging, they asked, why does Esther transgress what is written in the law? Thou shalt not let his body remain all night upon the tree. Esther answered them. Now this is related to our story that we're going to have later, because King Saul had killed the proselytes of the Gibeonites. His sons hung upon the gallows from the beginning of barley harvest until the day when rain came down upon them, which lasted 6 months. And when the Israelites came up to appear before the temple, the nations asked them, why do these hang? And the Israelites answered them, because their father has laid his hand upon the proselytes of the Gibeonites and killed them. How much more does the wicked Haman and his sons, who wanted to destroy all Israel, deserve to hang on the gallows? Yea, forever. So in other words, what's the idea here? The idea is that, if the proselytes of the Gibeonites and his sons can hang on, the gallows, which is certainly not correct, then certainly somebody like Haman and his sons, by the way, it doesn't say that Haman's sons were wicked, by the way, it's an assumption, right? But in the Midrash Rabbah here, it says here in the Hebrew, V'amar de Rabbi Pinchas, Sarich Lomar, Harbona Zachor Lato. Harbona should be remembered for good. V'amar Rav Sarich Lomar, Arur Haman, Arurim Banav, Arura Zeresh Isho. And Rabbi Sarich said, we should say, right, cursed is Haman, cursed are his sons, cursed is Zeresh, his wife, as it is said in Mishlei, B'shem, shame? Is that what it says? B'shem Hashem. B'shem Rishaim Yirkav. The names of the evil people should rot. Okay, it's pretty rough stuff to start off with today. Okay, but by the way, we're what we're all living in today, where bodies are actually rotting and whatever. This doesn't even seem so awful. I mean, it's pretty awful, but it's not so terrible. Now we're coming to Rizpah, all right? And here you could see, we'll come to the text soon, but here you can see Rizpah fighting off the birds, the crows, the ravens, the whatever these things are. A vulture, I guess that's what it says here, the vulture, right? To me, vultures usually look worse than this particular one here. And here you can see the sons are all hanging, and she's fighting off the vultures so that they don't, right? And in the background, these men are crucified. This very much looks like a crucifixion, right? This is George Becker in 1875. It's a very famous, very famous picture. Rizpah herself appears in 2 Samuel 3, first as a sexual commodity as one of Saul's concubines and mother to 2 of his sons. And we don't hear about her again until David is made king. And also that we hear about her as well when somebody wants to, I forget who it is, Avner, I think it is, wants to marry her. And that's, since she was a concubine of Saul, that's looked upon as a, trying to seize the crown, so to speak. Okay, so who is Rizpah bat Aya, object or subject? All right, and here is the story with Avner. Louise, you want to read? You have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
During the war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner supported the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine named Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you lain with my father's concubine?" Abner was very upset by what Ishbosheth said, and he replied, "Am I a dog's head from Judah? Here I have been loyally serving the house of your father Saul and his kinsfolk and friends, and I have not betrayed you into the hands of David. Yet this day you reproach me over a woman. May God do thus and more to Abner if I do not do for David as the Lord swore to him, to transfer the kingship from the house of Saul and to establish the throne of David over Israel and Judah from Dan to Beersheba." Ishbosheth could say nothing more in reply to Abner because he was afraid of him.
Okay, so Ishbosheth is sort of a weak person, by the way. Even his name, Ishbosheth, which implies that there's something to be ashamed about him. And also, I don't remember if he's the one with a limp. He might be the one with a limp. And he's accusing Avner of disloyalty, because if you sleep with the king's concubine, as I said earlier, you're trying to take over. So here's another picture that we can see here, where she's fending off, right? She's guarding the bodies, but here it looks as if the bodies are on the ground, and she's fending off the. So she, and I believe that, pay attention to this this thing here. Am I a dog's head from Judah? Because I think that correct me if I'm wrong, so you picked this up, the dog's idea of the dog? In your
Yes. Mhm.
Yes. All right. You never noticed it before, but since I just reread your poem now, I realize that that's where you probably got it from. Okay. So, all right. So, and so because Saul is already dead, he still dominates the account, right, in 2 Samuel. And there's what's going to happen is there's blood guilt is going to go on for a crime that was committed in the distant past. It just continues to go on and on. And during this time period, there's a famine of 3 years. And when there's a long famine, it's considered to be God's displeasure with what's going on. So, so this is very interesting because Saul, we did not know this. We only are hearing about this for the first time, that Saul violated the treaty. There had been a treaty made in the days of Joshua, I believe. And so that they pretended to be something that they were not. And so by violating the treaty, he is guilty of, of something very serious when he tried to exterminate them, right? And so the question is, are the Gibeonites Israelites or are they not, right? In other words, if they're in there, do they threaten Saul's kingdom? And so there's a lot of political stuff going on, and similar to what's going on today with all the politics that we have here. You never know who's on one side. People trade sides, people leave sides, right? And a lot of people do interesting things just to try to stay in power. So anyway, so Saul is guilty of violating a treaty that had been made, not under the best conditions, because the people lied about their situation, right? And perhaps they should have wiped out the Gibeonites, but they never did. But Saul but Saul did that, and so he ended up killing them. But these people were protected by treaty. Okay, and now we come to our story. And Toby, would you like to read it? There was a famine during the reign of David.
Sure. There was a famine during the reign of David, year after year for 3 years. David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord replied, "It is because of the blood guilt of Saul and his house, for he put some Gibeonites to death." David responded, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." Thereupon the Gibeonites said to the king, "The man who massacred us and planned to exterminate us so that we should not survive in all the territory of Israel, let 7 of his male issue be handed over to us, and we will impale them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, the chosen of the Lord." And the king replied, "I will do so."
Let's stop there for 1 minute. Let's stop there for 1 minute.
Sure.
So what is he asking here? What are the Gibeonites asking for? And notice the king doesn't hesitate for a minute. David doesn't hesitate for a minute. "I will do so." That reminds us of Rebecca, right? When they ask Rebecca, "Will you go?" And she says, "Elech, I'll go." No. Or Abraham, when Hagar tells him, take my concubine and sleep with her, and he just goes ahead and doesn't say, "Honey, I love you." He just does it, right? So we have these very quick actions here. But what is he demanding here? What is he demanding?
7 offspring from the house of Saul.
Of Saul.
be-
Okay. So now, what's David's relationship with Saul? Do you remember?
Besides a bad one, he was a son-in-law.
Was a son-in-law, right? He was married to Michal, and also he was
A rival,
and he was also but he was also very good friends with Jonathan, right? They had a love pact. We don't know if it's more than just, brotherly love, or it was, more than that. But the point is, when he mourns, over them, it's really, so what happens? Go on now. Instead of
Jonathan's son, the king took Armoni and Mephibosheth, the 2 sons that Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, bore to Saul, and the 5 sons that Merav, daughter of Saul, bore to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Mehothalite, and he handed over them to the Gibeonites. They impaled them on the mountain before the Lord. All 7 of them perished at the same time. They were put to death in the first days of the harvest, the beginning of the barley harvest.
Okay, so before we go on to Rizpah, so what we have here then is instead of taking Jonathan's sons, we should have taken, right? He takes Rizpah's, who's the concubine, right? And she's dignified with a name, right? Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, right? She doesn't have a father, but she has a mother, and takes Merav, right? And by the way, in the Midrash, sometimes Merav and Michal is confused with, so it's not clear because Michal was actually, it's not really clear, all right? If it's Michal or Merav, but the point is that David is taking either Merav's or Michal's sons, right? But not the ones he should have, okay? And the fact that he agrees to this is really awful. Okay, now what happens?
Then Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth, and spread it on a rock for herself, and she stayed there from the beginning of the harvest until rain from the sky fell on the bodies. She did not let the birds of the sky settle on them by day, or the wild beasts approach by night.
Okay, so this is what she does, and we can see it beautifully in this picture, right? You have the sackcloth on the ground. You see the sackcloth on the ground, and she's sitting there, and she's protecting the bodies, right? She's sitting on a rock. This was done very, very literally. Okay, and now David was told.
David was told what Saul's concubine, Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, had done. And David went and took the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the citizens of Yabesh Gilead, who had made off with them from the public square of Beit Shan, where the Philistines had hung them up on the day the Philistines killed Saul at Gilboa. He brought up the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan from there, and he gathered the bones of those who had been impaled. And they buried the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan in Zelah, in the territory of Benjamin, in the tomb of his father Kish. And when all that the king had commanded was done, God responded to the plea of the land thereafter.
So wait a minute, what's going on here? Who's being buried?
Saul and Jonathan, who were killed long before.
Yeah,
and evidently the ones that were just the 7 that were just killed.
okay, but isn't that interesting that it doesn't say that it's them?
Maybe because it might then raise asking if there's a conflict between Rizpah.
We don't know.
Although actually, yeah, because it does say he was told this is his response to Rizpah doing it. So it could be that he felt shamed.
Right, so the assumption is that, but it doesn't say that directly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they had also been impaled, right? They had also been hung up, right? That's what hung up means, impaled, right? So they had also been hung up. So I think this is very, very interesting that you don't have it said directly, but whatever, all right? The famine now ends, okay. And so what you have here is, what you have in front of you here is the commentary in the Jewish Study Bible. And what you have here, first of all, the whole idea of intergenerational punishment, which which exists, but during the period of the prophets in Ezekiel's time, you're not supposed to have intergenerational punishment. So the fact that you are having it is a problem, all right? The fact that the act of Saul is never mentioned anyplace else. And not only that, but the entire people, this is collective punishment, have to bear the consequences, starvation of Saul's sin, right? So you have here, but the whole idea of when is Rizpah there from? She's there from the period of the winter, right? And during the hot summer, she guards the smelly corpses, right? And you're supposed to avoid this situation. Okay, so on the other hand, David realizes that Rizpah has done something really very noble. Okay, so this is I had this earlier. Actually, I should actually cut this. We don't need to repeat this. Okay, and the Midrash talks about it, right? He talks about the loving kindness of Rizpah, right? That she was there for 7 months, and that David apparently had not mourned, right, or had not done what he was supposed to do concerning Saul, because he was buried outside the land. And that's really why he's being punished. But when he hears about Rizpah, what she's done, he realizes, and it's an a fortiori argument, if she, who is but a woman, acts with so much loving kindness towards those 7, must not I, who am a king, do infinitely more? So he straight away went off to show them. But again, it's Jonathan and Saul. I think we can, there's some questions here as to the 7 sons. What do you think, by the way, Sue? Do you think there's some questions about that? I'm just seeing this for the first time. That's why.
Uh-huh. It could be. I mean, or if he did it, it was more of an afterthought. I mean, the text obviously is stressing that he's doing it for Saul and Jonathan.
Right, and it keeps on stressing that, right?
Yeah,
So
maybe he feels guilty about the 7 sons and kind of doesn't even want to bring up the issue again, or wants to hide it, or
right. So I think, so this whole idea of giving them a proper burial, I'm not so sure that, first of all, he wouldn't have given them a proper burial if not for Rizpah. But the question is he really doing that, And you also have a very interesting story in Sophocles' Antigone, we'll look at that in a minute, where you also have something like that. And this story is a little bit more like Greek tragedy than a biblical story, where you have blood guilt and ritual sacrifice and vigil over bodies. It's really very, very interesting. And what it says here, this is Cheryl Exum, who's a wonderful Bible scholar, wonderful feminist Bible. And what she says here, a central feature of this story is the legitimate claims of the state versus the fundamental right of the dead to burial. And this is so important right now. If you think about it, I mean, when you wrote your poem, when I taught this for the very first time, we were not in the situation that we're in today, right? And today, I mean, all of these questions are being, raised. And I think that particular, statement is just really, really unbelievable if you think about it. Okay, so here's a picture of, okay, so here you have a caricature here of Sarah Bernhardt, portrayed as the Old Testament heroine, Rizpah, protecting her son from the clerical vultures of the Catholic Church. So here's the church, right? Here's the church, right? You can see a man's head there. This is the church, who are vultures, right? Who are after Rizpah. I mean, it's sort of they're anti-Semitic against her, and she's protecting her son from the vultures. Were they trying to convert him? It's not clear. Anyway, this is a poster from that time. We already saw the Joseph Turner picture. This is Joseph Turner. We already saw that. And this is Tissot's depiction of Rizpah. Right? Again, notice the crosses here. Right? I mean, we call them crosses today, but okay. And now we come to Sue's poem. And so this is a collection of modern Midrash. And I think next week we'll try to, you should think what you want to do for your book launch,
Okay.
Okay. And so here, Sue, would you like to read this? Now, the Hebrew, you wrote this originally in Hebrew, right?
Correct. It's the only one in the collection that I wrote in Hebrew.
I asked for the women's study day or for this?
No, I just actually it was after your lecture or in the women's study day in 2020. And this is one of the things that helped me get through the lockdowns was writing these midrashim. So
Okay. And this was the only one you wrote in Hebrew, right? Correct me if I'm-
correct. Hmm.
Yeah. And I was very moved by it, and I asked you to say that. Okay, so those of you who could follow in the Hebrew, or you could actually, I will look at your notes in a minute. Let me just show you this.
Okay.
So what she has here is the way it appears in her book. In other words, this is here, and then what she has is, this is from her book, that she has the lament, right, which we just saw, to Samuel. Then she has the poem. Did you change the poem at all, or is it the same?
No, it's the same.
Okay, and notice that she has footnotes here. All right, there are footnotes, and then it's all on one page, and here are the notes. So we'll look at the notes afterwards, or should we look at the notes first? What do you think? Oh,
It probably makes more sense after.
okay. So I think it's easier to read from what I have than from your copy there. So
Okay.
we'll read it. Okay.
Okay, you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Lament of Rizpah bat Aya. They call me a bitch's tail, that the dog's head gnaws at will or licks for his pleasure while I have no chance to escape. They call me a cellar who sleeps on the cement floor. I have sunk to rock bottom while there is no roof on high to protect my sons. They call me bones that the vultures drink the blood and the vermin eat the flesh while the sun bleaches them. Mother Aya, where are you, my dear mother? The buzzards are eating the harvest. Why didn't you tell me that men are dogs who eat our children while loving their power more than they love tender, vulnerable babes?
Okay, this is even stronger today than when you wrote it, I believe. This whole idea, by the way, of the English of love, tender, vulnerable babes sounds a little bit like I'm going to look it up in a minute, but like one of the Psalms that we say at the very end, where you toss babies against the wall. But this really, do you want to? Let's look at the footnotes. You could, and then if you want to add something to the poem.
Okay, so I find it really interesting that Rizpah, she's one of the few women who is identified as the daughter of her mother, Rizpah bat Aya, or almost every other woman. If a parent is mentioned at all, it's always the father. In fact, there are very few men, there are very few individuals who are identified by their mother. And the fact that she's one is, I find really interesting. Okay, so the confusion about whether it was Michal's children or Merav's children is because the Bible, the biblical text says Michal, but it also says that she had no children. So it's just assumed by many that it's a scribal error and should have said Merav and not Michal. And then I bring the source, which we already saw, of Avner and sleeping with the concubine. Point out that the word Rizpah in modern Hebrew means floor. So all the business about it going low and not having a roof over her head in the basement, it's all based on her name, Rizpah. Aya, the mother's name, actually has 3 meanings. It is a popular Hebrew girl's name. It also means wherefore, like wherefore art thou, where in Genesis, and it's also the name of a buzzard. Which, when you have the vultures coming to eat the bones, it's the fact that her mother's name is Aya is very fitting. So those
So
were
there was a
my
third.
notes. What?
There was a third meaning.
Well, that it's a girl's name
Okay.
means wherefore, and that it's a buzzard.
Which is like Ayeka. But I was also thinking Aya sounds like I, like oh yeah. Right? It also has that sound as well. Okay. So let's just go back for 1 second to to, so it's interesting that you decided in the Hebrew to say martef instead of saying Rizpah.
I think because a floor, I mean, could be high. If a building has 16 stories, the floor of the 16th story is up, whereas a cellar is about as low as you can get.
Ah, very nice. Okay, that's very nice. Okay, because you want to have the lowness. By the way, she's a concubine, but a concubine is the Hebrew word pilegish is not the same as concubine.
Right.
We've talked about this many times. Hagar is sometimes called a pilegish, but she's sometimes called an isha, which means she's a wife. So the whole idea of or pilegish bagiva, the concubine of Gibeah, she's also a legal wife. So a concubine has full rights. It's not exactly, a concubine that we think of. The English translation is not so great. And then this business with the dogs we already saw came from the connection with Avner, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where you thought of it. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So now we have, coming to what I mentioned earlier, this is a picture of Antigone, right? By Sophocles, right? And by the way, it appears in a journal called Shofar, in an article called Extreme Attention to the Real, Levinas and Religious Hermeneutics, right? So even though this is a picture of Antigone, it says here, justice is done, but in the process, injustice is also done. We are left with the image of this woman, this mother, this Rizpah bat Aya. In other words, Antigone is a Rizpah bat Aya, who for 6 months watches over the corpse. Echoes here of Antigone. So the echoes go in both directions, right? The echoes from Rizpah to Antigone, or from Antigone to Rizpah. It so often seems to be women who perform the duty of mourning in the wake of masculine justice. It's a very, very moving picture. I can make it a little bit bigger, just I can see the birds. And here you have a little, what is this little thing over here? This little speckle of bread. Some of you have better eyes than I do. Can you figure out what this is?
Is it a lamb? Or is it a dog?
No, lamb, a dog. It's hard to tell. I don't know. And here you have people in the background. You have sea or mountains.
It looks like actually a man's face over there.
What? A man's face?
Yeah, if you look towards the left of that orange dot, it looks like a man's face.
To the left.
See? Right there? Doesn't that?
This?
No, over more, a little more to the left.
Oh, yeah. Oh, actually, or it looks like a lion.
Ah, it looks kind of like
maybe
a man's
it's
face. Yeah, I don't know.
a little bit like a lion.
Looks like a pharaoh or something with the
Right,
head.
exactly, Sue. It looks like a pharaoh. It looks like he's wearing an Egyptian head covering.
Who knows? Anyway, this is a Greek character. So on the other hand, it really fits in very well to they decided to use this as I don't know if he accompanied it with the I don't know if I stuck this in here or I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, or if he brought attention to it. But anyway, whatever. Okay, and here you can see this is a study that was made for Rizpah, and here is the actual figure over here of Rizpah, right? And here's the depiction of Rizpah. And Exum points out, she has commentary on that. How are we doing with time? We're okay. And so even though her story doesn't take up that much, right? Look, let's go back just to see how short her story is, right? How little space it takes, right? Here, look, it's only one verse, verse 10. That's it. Right? And then she was told what he did, right? But so it's okay, when we talk about space, literally, it takes up very little space in the story. You know, it really leaves it leaves its mark, right? And later on, her vigil results in David and the Gibeonites offering a sacrifice of atonement aimed at cleansing the land of evil, right? So in other words, she's assuming, as everyone else is that these remains are also buried, right? I'm just raising a question there. And here's another picture. This is Lauren Wright Pittman, right? Who sees Rizpah as a Black woman who is, this is the artist, but I was sure the artist would be Black herself, by the way. But this is a picture of the artist. I actually looked for a picture of her. She writes here that Lauren was invigorated by the classes. She looked at the intersection of scripture, art, and worship. All right. So I don't know what she's clearly making a statement here. All right, about Black women crying over their sons, which is something that happens a lot. So by doing this, she really completely changes the narrative, and to make this into every woman who is suffering, and in particular a Black woman. I think it's a fascinating picture. Okay. She goes on. What year? In 2020, Yael Lachman wrote that this particular nightmare from our sacred text does not unfold on the streets of Portland or Minneapolis, but it sounds disturbingly familiar this summer. I don't know what was happening that summer in 2020, July 2020. Anyone remembers what was happening? Here, Rizpah's story is the very nightmare that our Black and brown sisters and brothers are living every day, right? Does anyone remember what was happening then?
Yes. God, I can't think of his name.
Was that Minneapolis?
The
George
Black Lives
Floyd?
Matter whole thing reared up, and it was the killing of
George Floyd.
George
yes,
Floyd,
George
right.
Floyd, and there were marches in Washington and in every community. Yeah.
I'm making connections with it for today's situation, but you can make connections anytime, okay. This is an article, I don't know who wrote it, in deadmaiden.com, right? She's not an agitator. She is a shomeret, a guardian, right? A shomeret is a person who guards over dead bodies, right? And there are actually courses for that. You could be in a Chevra Kadisha. I don't know if any of you are in a Chevra Kadisha, but if you are, or you probably have friends who are in a Chevra Kadisha, these are people who sit with the dead to make sure that there's no, but that they don't remain alone. And so shomrim stay with the deceased. The word shomrim means to guard, right? Shomer. They sit with the deceased from the time they die till they're buried, all right? The body is never left alone. And they could read poems or psalms, right? But they have to be guarded. Their dignity has to be defended. And so Rizpah is a model for us today, as we see mothers fighting for the dignity of their children, for timely burial, for the honor due to the lives of the children who lived. The mothers of the movement for Black lives, the parents of young Black men and women slain by police brutality, mirror this legacy. All right, so this is clearly reflecting, this was in 2016. I guess something else happened in 2016, but terrible things are always happening. And so you also have the Talmudic readings of Emmanuel Levis, and one of the readings is about Rizpah Bat Aya. This is a little heavy, right? This is a little heavy, but maybe we should read it. Norman, you read heavy well.
From Levinus ended this
Yeah.
commentary
Yeah.
with these words. And what remains as well after this somber vision of the human condition and of justice itself? What rises above the cruelty inherent in rational order, and perhaps simply in order, is the image of this woman, this mother, this Rizpah Bataya, who for 6 months watches over the corpses of her sons, together with the corpses that are not her sons, to keep from the birds of the air and the beasts of the field the victims of the implacable justice of men and of God. What remains after so much blood and tears shed in the name of immortal principles is individual sacrifice, which, amidst the dialectical rebounds of justice and all its contradictory about faces, without hesitation finds a straight and sure way.
Okay, now continue. So the next comes from,
Okay.
I happen to know Yael Lynn. She grew up in our community. I know her very well. Okay, this is Elizabeth Goldman.
The last certain value when the sky seems empty and so many dead people can't even be buried because their corpses were destroyed. What makes life possible is goodness, neither celestial justice nor human justice. What allows the conclusion of famine is also what allows staying alive after the Shoah. At the beginning of that same reading, Levinus defined despair and loss of belief in the triumph of good as transgressions against God. When suffering or witnessing suffering, one might become a nihilist. This is a moral danger, as nihilism allows one to denounce any law, including moral laws. But the act of a single woman.
Stop for 1 minute. I can't let that go without, this is what's happening today in Israel and in America, without mentioning names, but I just can't allow this to pass. Go on, sorry.
But the act of a single woman, the helping hand offered to another, makes it possible to retain some hope in humankind and in the world. What allows one not to lose belief in the triumph of good is invincible goodness. Ethics, responsibility for others, are dependent on hope, the opposite of despair. Therefore, Rizpah Bataya is the biblical hero of the empty sky era, the post-Shoah era. She teaches us to love the Torah more than we love God.
Okay, I always have a problem with people who have a positive spin to make on atrocities. But okay, but people are entitled to do that. Look, I don't know if any of you read my blog this week, but I sort of did that myself. So I'm occasionally guilty of doing that as well. So the next thing we're going to just take a quick look at is, and I'll leave, is from Linda Levine's The Bible According to Eve. Let me just call it up here. Just find it. She spells Rizpah differently, so before I had trouble with the whoops. I thought I had it. Rizpah. Okay.
Why?
So this is, am I sharing or not yet?
No.
Okay. Now I'll share. Might as well find it. Okay. 1 minute. I'll share it in 1 minute. Oops. I'm still looking for it. Sorry about that. Oh, that's interesting. Here we go. Saul's concubine. Okay. Now I'll share with you. I have to find you first. Share. Okay. Share. All right, Sue. I was supposed to congratulate you in the other class, so we could congratulate you here today. Okay.
Thank you. And I apologize for being late, but I'm back to my exercise program today.
I didn't notice you were here, but good eyes, Geraldine. Okay.
Thank you, Geraldine. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so in chapter 18, which is entitled Ishbosheth and David, we have a section. This is in Linda's book. We have Saul's concubine, Rizpah, and she tells this tale here, right? Barbara, would you like to start reading? I'll make it a little bit bigger.
Okay. We women have very little control over our lives. We begin our lives as the property of our fathers, continue as the property of our husbands, and end up, if widows, as the property of our sons, or if spinsters, the property of our brothers. Such was my fate. First, I was the property of my father Aiah, then I became the concubine of King Saul. When Saul died fighting the Philistines, I became the property of his son, Ishbosheth. Normally, no man is allowed to enter the royal harem, so I was very surprised when one night the commander-in-chief of Ishbosheth's army, General Avner, suddenly appeared in our sleeping quarters and forced himself upon me. Don't think he took me out of lust. No, he wanted to stake his claim to the throne. This resulted in a fierce argument between Ishbosheth and the general. The outcome was that General Avner transferred his allegiance to Ishbosheth's enemy, David, the son of Jesse. When both the general and Ishbosheth were assassinated, I became the property of King David. Saul's death had been followed by 3 years of drought, resulting in a terrible famine throughout the land. It turned out that we were being punished for 2 crimes, one committed by Saul and one committed by David. The first was that no restitution had been made to the Gibeonites of Nob after Saul had killed their priests for harboring David. The second was that David had not given Saul and his sons a proper burial.
Okay, before we go, I noticed that she basically is retelling the story pretty much on the biblical tale, all right? The question is this a midrash or a retelling? And maybe we might want to talk about that afterwards, all right? Joyce, would you like to go on reading?
Sure. To put this right, David invited the Gibeonites to a peace conference. Neither Ahinoam's daughter Michal nor I had the slightest idea of why we and our sons were invited. We looked on in silence as our sons were made to walk past the sacred chest from the sanctuary, astounded when none of them were able to do so, horrified when they were handed over to the Gibeonites. We were mad with grief when they were hung before our eyes. Michal and I never got over it. Every spring, when the barley is harvested, the memory of what happened returns to haunt me.
Stop there for a minute, Joyce. So what we have here is she's introducing Michal and into the story, and now we're going to have feelings which definitely do not exist in the Bible. All right, so this is already getting to be more than a retelling. Go on.
You might be thinking that I uttered some words of protest over the death of my 2 sons, but I did no such thing. What was the point? It wouldn't bring them back to life. All I could do was whisper to myself, surely Yahweh knows what he is doing. There must be a reason for all this. After covering the corpses with sackcloth, I stood guard day and night to protect them from eaten by scavengers. I continued to guard their bodies for 7 long months, from the beginning of the harvest to the start of the rainy season, when the ground would be soft enough to bury them. Every passing stranger would stop and stare at the 7 bodies lying on the ground before asking, "Who are these men?" I would reply, "They are royal princes, the sons and grandsons of our dead king. 2 of them are mine." Invariably, the next question would be, "But why haven't they been buried? Isn't it written in your laws that a corpse must not be left unburied overnight?" Yet these corpses must have been left unburied for months. What crime did these poor lads commit to be singled out for such treatment? This I answered by explaining their father had some Gibeonite converts from No put to death. To their question, what kind of converts were they to be avenged in such a manner? I would respond, converts of convenience, who to save themselves converted to our religion when our people conquered Canaan.
Before
There
we
were-
go on, before we go
yeah.
on, what does this remind you of? This whole dialogue that she's having here. As you were reading, I'll have someone else continue, but as you were reading, I was thinking to myself, this is like performative art, you know, where you have people standing on the street and, you know, with banners, like today with banners, and then people stop. I mean, today, unfortunately, they throw stones at each other. But if it's done properly, you know, people ask questions, what's this? What's the meaning of this? And you can explain. And, you know, it's like having, you know, booths out there, and you can give information. And to a certain degree, she's doing that, right? Passing strangers, stop. What's this? What's going on? And she explains. She gives them a little history lesson, right? It's really very interesting. And so the reaction was the same. Susan Ferris, would you continue? The reaction
was always the same.
No,
Good
Susan,
heavens, if
do
you
it.
got, oh,
Please,
Want me to
Susan,
continue?
yes, please.
The reaction was always the same. Good heavens, if your God can punish royal princes for a crime committed by their father against people who converted just to save their skins, what will he do for people who convert because they believe in him? Your people are truly extraordinary, and your God even more so. We too want to convert to your religion. The famine ended with the winter rains. Only then did I realize why Yahweh had allowed my sons to die. My lonely vigil over my 2 dead sons had shamed David into giving Saul and his sons an honorable burial, thereby appeasing Yahweh's wrath, ending the drought and saving our people from starvation. I have a question. What
Before
happened
we
to
go on,
Michal?
yeah, what?
What happened to Michal? She's guarding all these dead bodies. Where is Michal? They
Right.
were her sons too.
Right. But she brought her in, but she really wasn't part. This is like, what do we call a red herring in a story? Where you don't continue it. But
I see.
but wait a minute, but there are things, some of the things bother me here. I hope they bother you too, right? If the person wants to convert to your religion, because does that make sense to you?
No.
Right? I mean, it's like, okay, that's one thing. And the other is, how does she comfort herself? Does that seem realistic to you?
Not really.
No, I don't think it's realistic. On the other hand, very often we do, and this goes on all the time, we do try to give reason for something terrible that happens, right? We don't want to think that something is totally meaningless. We don't want to think that sacrifice is meaningless. And so we have to talk about bravery. We have to talk about saving our people, being guardians. And somehow or another, women are very often those who are put into that position of trying to justify or understand or giving meaning. Okay, so that is the, you know, and then the next part, it has to do with King David. Anyway, we've actually finished 3 minutes early, so that's not so terrible. Would anyone like to comment? So two different, on the one hand, we have Sue's poem, which is, you know, something in itself. And then we have this particular rereading and giving, you know, some sort of justification for something really horrendous happening. What are your thoughts about all of this, if any?
Nobody mentions the sons themselves.
Okay.
they're robbed of their futures and their adulthoods and everything on this seemingly nutsy reason. I don't know, just it strikes me as very awful and very contrived.
Okay, that's fascinating because today, when we're so used to all the stories. I mean, unfortunately, the other day there were we had 4 soldiers killed. And, in Israel, I mean, there's like public mourning really when this happens. And you look at the pictures and you see, oh my gosh, look at these, young men. And then we all talk about how, their background and what they're being deprived. And you're right, this seems very, very cold, right? And the closest we have come to mourning is when David mourns Avshalom. In Avshalom, and by the way, great music was created to about Avshalom, David's son, who, despite the fact that he tried to, there was a civil war because of him, but David clearly loved him very much, and his loss was felt. Or in David's mourning of Saul and Jonathan, right? Ech naflu giborei, whatever Yisrael, which is recited today, right? It's recited today at funerals. So there is some emotion, but here you're right. There's no sense of the actual loss. Yeah, very good point. I myself was so used to seeing this in the Bible, I didn't notice it myself. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, Joyce.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Sue for her wonderful poem. It was amazing. Thank you, Sue. And then I was just thinking that this story is like such horror, and we forget about horrors. And in a way, what is going on in Israel today is so much a part of it. And it really just hits you in the belly.
And hopefully we won't have, after this is all over, hopefully we won't have 3 years of famine or whatever. I mean, right now,
Yeah.
we're going slowly but surely. We're going to go into a second year or a third year. We're finishing 600. It's almost 2 complete years, right? Yeah. So, and then
3 years, it'll be 3.
we might still be at war in 3 years. I don't see an end to it. So, God forbid, but that's,
It's really horror.
And it's really the idea of unburied bodies is so part of what's happening right now, and using bodies as tradable items. I mean, and we're so it really does speak to us today. Anybody else? Yes, Barbara.
I just wanted to say that I don't serve on Hever Kadisha, but I have been a guard reading the poems, reading the Psalms. And it would be so valuable for us to really know this connection to Rizpah. Hang the artwork in the room where we're doing it, something like that. I think too many simply understand it in a limited way by not relating it to the story of Rizpah.
You mean, is it coming from her, the whole idea? That's a good question. I mean,
well, I knew the idea of being with someone so that they weren't alone. I didn't know about the fighting across the vultures and staying there for 6 months. And I didn't know that extended part.
Well, it shouldn't happen. I mean, it's something that there shouldn't be bodies out there for 6 months, obviously. Or in the case of Saul and Jonathan, I mean, that was even longer, the bodies were exposed.
But I never associated it, and I'm going to check with our Hever Kadisha. Have they made in their teachings? Have they made?
Yeah.
How much have they made of this?
And if not, maybe they should incorporate it. That's a very good point. Yeah, Jill.
That's what makes me think, Barbara, because I actually, when I was in Florida, I was on Clever Kadisha, being a nurse. They had asked me at some point. And I mean, I have little booklets and stuff that I guess our committee had made up and whatever. And it was never mentioned. Rizpah has never been mentioned. And maybe, I don't know if we're a small community or if it's even mentioned in any Chevra Kadisha. But the point of connecting this story, why we started the Chevra Kadisha, why we don't leave a body by itself after a death, there was never a connection. I mean, something.
The first time I said yes, it was, would you please, so the body isn't by itself, that kind of thing.
Right.
And our Chevra Kadisha is going through a learning process, and it would be a good time to ask.
Good. I'm going to actually put up the slide again from that, just so we have, 1 second.
I think some communities do things for so long, and then new people come in and they're not really sure of why they're doing them. They just do them and are never shown or never explained what the background.
They explain why you do it, but they never connected to Rizpah. I mean,
That's what I mean. They don't use the
educated.
biblical.
I have a little booklet that they gave everybody when you start being on Chevra Kadisha. I mean, a lot of it's just the prayers and the how you do it, but still, this connection I've never been taught.
Right. Well, it's an interesting connection. And by the way, one of the sources, the process of tahara, right, the cleaning of the body, has its source in Ecclesiastes, right? As we go forth, so we shall return. Just as a baby is washed and enters the world clean, and pure Jews also leaves the world cleansed. So this would be the job of the Chevra Kadisha, and usually, you want to have women washing women's bodies, not men washing women's bodies. Yeah. One of my very closest friends, it was very moving to me. One of my very closest friends told me that she was on the Chevra Kadisha. We had started one in our synagogue many years ago, and she was a physician. She was used to dealing with dead bodies because she was I can't think of the name right now. Norman, help me. People.
Pathologist.
Pathologist. Thank you. She was a pathologist and really one of my close friends.
Oh, yeah.
And so she told me she was on the Chevra Kadisha for my mother, right? And it was very meaningful to me that somebody that I knew had volunteered and to be there.
When you know the person, the first time I did somebody I knew, I was on Chevra Kadisha for somebody, I was a little bit like nervous about the situation because I knew this person. When you don't know them, it's
right.
But you know what? It was very, very meaningful. It was very. I mean, being on Chevra Kadisha itself is when you leave there, you just feel it's something you can't explain. I mean, it's just such a mitzvah. I can't explain it basically. But when the first time I was on Chevra Kadisha, a woman I knew, very well, an older woman. It was, I mean, the most beautiful thing, you felt like you can do this last thing for this person. So, it is an amazing thing if it's something that, I mean, I'm a nurse, so I've dealt with mostly with children, but, so it was fine for me to do it. But it is, an amazing thing to do, but it's special. It's just special. I don't know how to explain it.
Norman.
When we were in Pittsburgh just now, we attended a Jewish film festival evening of short films. And one of the films, and maybe I can try to find the link to it. I believe the name was The Secret Society, and it's entirely about Chevra Kadisha.
Really?
And narrated by people who are members of Chevrot Kadisha. And it was very, very moving. And I will try to see if I can find a link to it. It's a very short film, like 5-6 minutes.
Okay, let me just, we can continue, but let me just stop the recording. Some of you probably have to leave anyway. Stop recording.